Welcome to the Tuesday Ask the Experts webinar from First Canada. Today is Tuesday, February the 5th. I can't even believe it's already February. We have 2 weeks to go in the build season, the last build season. Well, not the last build season, but the last build season that has a stop build day, which is one of the things we're going to talk about. So we have a bunch of guests and experts with us tonight. We're going to talk about a bunch of things, but a little bit of housekeeping before we get into that. As always, the webinar is being recorded. The recording will be placed or uploaded on the First Canada YouTube channel. The link to that will be sent out to everybody that's on the webinar. It'll be sent out as well through the First Canada Facebook page. Any of the documents that we have will also send out to the people that are on the webinar or listening in. If at some point you hear about it, you weren't live with us, and you want to ask for a copy of it, please feel free to contact me at pkeenan@firstinspires.org. If you do have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, there's a chat box that you can put in your questions, and I'll get to those as we go through. Normally, our webinar goes to about 7:30. That's a little bit of a flexible time. We have some teachers on with us tonight. It was not my best skill throughout the years of teaching to figure out exactly how long my lessons were going to take. They were either too long or too short. It took me 31 years. I never got that down. So we have a lot of material. Will we get through it all? I don't think so, but we want to make sure that the webinar is useful for people. So if you do have a question, please put it in. If you have a question that occurs to you after you're watching this on YouTube, again, please email me with the question. I'll be happy to get back to you and direct you, if I don't know the answer, to somebody who does. So without much further ado, we're going to get going today. So we have a bunch of experts with us. At this point, we don't have Mr. Chisholm with us, but he might come on. He's with his team 1360 in Oakville, and they're very supportive of these webinars and new teams in First Canada and Ontario. But we also have Hinkle Young, who is the robot inspector, the senior lead robot inspector for Ontario. And you can see he's been involved with a bunch of teams, started with 188, 4069, 6544. And he's been a robot inspector since 2008. I know I had something about cycling in here. He must have taken it out. And he's been the lead robot inspector since 2014. AOC, nous avons Monique Ouellette, who is with Team 2706 from Ottawa, who's going to talk to us a little bit about Stop Build Day, potentially en français. And we have Megan Gillespie, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the key roles on her team, and especially as that relates to bumpers and building bumpers and all the bumper rules, which you're going to see. And not lastly, but last in the list, we have Monique Pouget, who is also perhaps going to speak to us a little bit in French and make this a bilingual webinar, the first one I've been part of, I think. And she is with Team 6331, and she is going to also talk about Stop Build Day, but they're all going to chime in as we go along on some of the other things that they have thoughts on, or maybe they've worked on with their team. So without much further ado, basically this is our agenda for tonight. Stop Build Day, bumpers, pit construction, and robot inspection. And we'll probably reverse those last two so that if George does join us, we can do that. If not, we'll push that one off till next week and hear about that as teams are starting to bag their robots or getting close to it in any case. So, Stop Build Day. The two I have on the list for this are the Moniques, Monique Ouellette and Monique Pouget. And Monique Ouellette, why don't you take us away?
So Stop Build Day. So we have in the manual, in the corrected version of the manual, the Stop Build Day is this actually Tuesday, February 19th. at 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. So there is the February 20 at 4:59 UTC, the universal time clock. But in Ontario and Quebec, that translates to 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, February 19. So each, depending on where everybody's from across the country, we have to pay attention to the universal time clock time and convert that to our local time. So it doesn't mean that everybody ends at 11:59, depending on where they are in the country.
So, and again, we mentioned that this is the last stop build day, which is kind of interesting. We've been getting questions. I've been getting questions, especially from rookie teams, about what all of that is involved with, and maybe Monique, you can tell us a little bit about what 2706 and 6331 does for our stop build day.
For 2706, we certainly do proceed all the way to 11:59. That has been our experience. We make an event out of it. It's late for students. Not all students attend, but we certainly get a lot of them. And we also have parents participating to some extent, visiting during the evening, bringing food, making sure that we still have energy to continue on until midnight. So when we finish, we then put the robot in the bag or bags. We have two that are provided with the kit of parts. You may need three. You can do that and just provide your own bag or a third bag. We're also provided with tags, about 10 blue tags, numbered tags, and therefore we put our robot, whether it's in one piece or several pieces, or one major piece and perhaps small pieces that haven't been installed and we've run out of time, we put that all in the bag and seal it with the blue tag. And we make sure we do that before midnight or 11:59, and we usually take photographs for posterity and to remind us how late we went.
That's interesting. I know there's a lot of celebrations that go around this, and that was one of the things that people are saying that they're disappointed in going in the future. But Monique, you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I agree. That's perfect. I don't think we've ever worked all the way till midnight because that would kind of be frowned upon at our school.
And that's part of it too. Is
down a school night, but we try to be as late as we can. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Do you want to add that, Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned about Fred about at your school. I'll add that our team is a community-based team, so we're not associated with any school. We have over 15 schools actually represented in our team. So from one school to the next, or it's really from one student to the next to decide with their parents if they can make it to midnight. It's an event for them if they can.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. With the team I was with, 4001, we called it bag, tag, and cake day, because we would always have a big slab cake to celebrate the end of the build season, but usually white cake, not chocolate very often. But yeah, it is a big celebration, and teams do it differently based on their circumstances and so forth. Now, this robot lockup form, there's lots of rules about that, but essentially every time you open the bag and close the bag, you have to put down times and who signs it and so forth. One of the difficulties, though, Monique Pouget, maybe you can talk about this, is keeping track of that form. What do you do to make sure that you have it when you need it?
Yes, well, we've had lots of mishaps with the forms, because any mistake we could make as a rookie team, we pretty much made. And one of them was being so careful with our form that we actually sent it away without having it signed on our lockup when we were leaving an event. So that we learned from that one. We had to chase it down on the highway, get it back, and sign it. We also made the mistake of not perfectly writing the number one time. I think we added an extra number, and the inspection crew really gave us heck for that one, and we ran into all kinds of issues. Took like an hour before we could unlock our.
Yeah. So there's.
So the important thing is to make sure it's very clearly written, and it's properly done, and then we take pictures, we sign it, we make sure everybody follows all the rules, and make sure that the kids don't get a hold of it.
Right.
That's the one thing where the mentors have to sign off, and if the kids get a hold of it and run away with it before you get to it, it can be a disaster. And
as we mentioned at the start, we probably can't go through all the rules of everything, but one of them that is important that teams, what are new, kind of forget is that you have to do that. You have to bag it after each of your events if you're going to go to another event. So in Ontario, there's 3 Ontario events you could for sure go to, the 2 districts that you're already in and the provincial championship. And there's an option in some cases to go to another one if there's room in another Ontario event. So that also has to be in there. So that's kind of an important one. So maybe Monique, you can tell us about what doesn't go or what does not have to go in the bag.
Certainly what does not go are the bumpers, and also the withholding allowance, which we'll speak about a little further. Obviously we don't put batteries in there as well, so it's strictly the robot and any mechanisms. If parts of the robots is incomplete, you have the option obviously to put it in incomplete and complete it at either competition or in the open bag period that you have before competition.
Right. So that's an important point that's different in Ontario. So if you're listening in Quebec or BC or Alberta, there's a difference between what happens in Ontario because it's district and what might happen at a regional event, or if you're a team in one of those other provinces. Or this year we have a team also in Manitoba, and we've had teams in Saskatchewan for the past few years. But maybe Monique Pouget, you can tell us a little bit about what that means when you have unbagged time before an event.
Well, usually when we have unbagged time, we are put on or fix whatever we didn't manage to properly get to work. It seems that no matter how carefully you plan things, for some reason, even if it's just when you get to the event, you want to make sure you go through everything. Something's going to have knocked loose during transportation, it always seems like. At least that's been our experience. When we have a perfectly working robot at school and we take it out, by the time we get down to Toronto, it's gotten shaken up to the point where we need to check everything, make sure everything's plugged in and properly fitted, and the bolts got knocked loose or whatever. We're hoping to build it better this year, but we hope every year to get better. So it's a good idea to have a checklist of all your main components and to go through them and make sure they're all working the way they should be.
And as both Moniques have mentioned, there's lots of restrictions on when and what you can work on. So you should make sure to read all of those rules. Certainly the one that's in the middle of this page about taking things back to the hotel to fix at an event is not allowed. So please, you'll hear it many times if you haven't already done it, read the rules. And it's not just drivers, it's not just coaches, it's not just adults. Everybody's got to read the rules. God knows there's enough of them for everybody. Okay, now some people will unbag their robot at some points. Monique Willette in Ottawa, do you do that often?
We do. In Ottawa, we're allowed, in the Ontario District, we are allowed to unbag for 2 reasons. One is for display or a brief display. And we do that actually a few days after stop build. We actually have an event hosted by our local library where we reveal our robot. So we do open the bag at that point, allow it to be displayed We typically don't run it or operate it, but we could. If we did, we would not use our drivers. We would use somebody else in the team.
Right.
So that's one possibility of unbagging. The unbagging, since we're in the Ontario district, we are allowed to unbag during the 1 week period before any competition. And we do that like surgery. We're allowed overall 6 hours, which you can break up in more than one session, as long as each session is a minimum of 2 hours. So if you actually only use a session of 1.5 hours, you actually have to count it as 2 hours. So you really have to pay attention as to how long each of your sessions is, and make sure that you add them correctly and display and put them on your lockup form. And that is really looked at by the inspectors to make sure that you're within the rules.
And as we all know, it's on an honor system. So, and that's one of the best parts about FIRST. I think everybody would agree, is the gracious professionalism and the way teams try to adhere to the rules. So it's really important. I think Hinkle's going to touch on the rules about the hours and so forth. So we'll get to that as we go along. But Monique explained it perfectly, I think. The withholding allowance, there's so many rules on that. You may want to you should take a very close look at that to make sure. I think some teams don't look at that closely enough, and what they find out is that there were ways that they could have done it. They were actually too stringent with the rules, and they were maybe overcautious. But so really, you want to keep an eye on that. I think the history of the the withholding allowance was for years where we had weather like this in the American Midwest, where schools were closed and teams lost a lot of time. So that was an accommodation that stayed with us. But one thing I wanted, maybe you could explain, is I'll say Monique Pouget, I know your microphone was going off and on there, so hopefully it's fixed. But what's a COTS or fabricated items?
Well, the fabricate, anything that we put together, we would store outside to be used. So essentially, any items that you could that you might want to exchange or put on your, such as a manipulator, some sort of thing like that. But generally, we have not had a lot of experience with a withholding allowance. We're not that advanced in our engineering yet that we've been able to bring whole things pre-made to the events to upgrade our robot yet. Hopefully that'll be on the horizon maybe for us this year. So I maybe would defer to someone with more experience in that area.
Yeah, perhaps I can add there. We have, not every year, but on occasion, we've had manipulators or mechanisms that we might have been concerned about that might get damaged during competition. So we would bring the same mechanism that we have on our second robot. We actually built a second robot for practice purposes. So we would, before competition, actually remove it from our second robot, and then we would count that within our withholding allowance, and we would report that when we weigh in at competition.
So that's a good explanation of it for sure. And again, I think most of these points were already touched on. So maybe before we get to Megan and bumpers, perhaps Monique Ouellette and then Monique Pouquet, maybe just give one or two quick tips about the Stop Build Day en français for the people who are listening to us who might be working on their French or might be French first language around the province and certainly outside of Ontario as well. So maybe first Monique Ouellette.
Je recommanderais d'en profiter, d'en faire un événement, la fin du 6 semaines, après beaucoup d'efforts et beaucoup de temps. Nous voulons que nos étudiants apprécient la conclusion du robot. et célébrer cet événement.
Merci. Et Monique Pouguet?
Je suis très d'accord. C'est important d'associer cette journée-là avec le succès de l'équipe. Peu importe si vous avez terminé ou non, paniquez pas si vous n'avez pas terminé. Comme on vient de discuter, il y a des possibilités d'échanger pour des manipulateurs qui vont mieux fonctionner pour ton robot plus tard. Si vous développez encore des idées, ce n'est pas trop tard. Assurez-vous de bien peser le robot. C'est une chose qu'on a oublié de mentionner, mais avant de le mettre dans le sac, c'est très important. C'est une autre erreur qu'on a faite dans notre première année, si je peux partager.
So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And great tips. Certainly the last one about weighing the robot, which we, as Monique said, we forgot to mention. That's sometimes hard to do. Many veteran teams will give you tips on how you can do that, but that's a big, important tip. If your robot is too heavy, you are not allowed to compete. It's not like it has to be close. It has to be less than the rules weight, which I believe is it 120 pounds this year?
125.
It is.
125?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
120.
Well, thank you very much. And our youngest expert today is Megan Gillespie from Team 4476, way out in Kingston, the Waffles. And Megan's going to talk to us a little bit about bumpers and maybe some important things.
Okay.
So take it away, Megan.
My first advice to anyone who's making bumpers is read the rules. Really, you don't want to go wrong when making bumpers and then have to change something at competition. It will set you back and will be very inconvenient, especially if you don't have a sewing machine.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I keep getting, Megan, is about the size of the noodles. Teams will go to the Canadian Tire and measure the noodles and say, oh, I can't find one that's 2.5 inches in diameter.
So it says 2.5 nominal, which means that they have to be approximately 2.5. So if like the tag on the or sticker on the bumper on the pool noodles say 2.5, then you're okay to buy those. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah,
it's really hard to find something that's actually 2.5.
So you mentioned sewing. Do the Waffles have reversible bumpers, or do they have 2 sets of bumpers?
We have reversible bumpers, so
which necessitates some sewing, I guess.
Yes. And also, just to get like nice corners, if you want, then it's really great to have sew it, because then you can get a nice crisp line.
That's good. I know that at 4001 we had boys that sewed, teachers, both male and female, that sewed, girls that sewed. So it's a great skill to have, and certainly when you're doing the reversal ones, it really makes a difference. One of the big questions always is about how much your robot has to be covered in bumpers. What do you normally do at the Waffles?
So we usually do either like 2 U's around the sides. So they would cover like 1 full side and then 6 inches on each side. But for the past 2 years, we've been, well, this year and last year, we have bumpers that are like just like 1 big U, covering 6 inches on either side of the front, and the whole rest of the robot.
And that's a key point, the one you made about the 6 inches around the front. So maybe you could explain that a little bit, because that's a big rule question.
So, yeah. On all the corners, you have to be from the corner covering 6 inches from the inside of your robot. So if you have a corner, if you're going to cut like a 6-inch piece of wood, or approximately plus or minus like the width of the wood if you want to, and that will be like the minimum that you have to cover on that side.
Okay, that's good to know. And maybe later on, Hinkle will talk to us a little bit about that, because there's always questions about what if the side is less than 6 inches? Do we still have to cover that in bumper? So that's a important one as well to note.
Yeah, like if you're going to have a section less than 6 inches, basically you have to cover the whole thing, or even like basically anything less than 12 inches, you have to have one bumper basically.
Yeah, so that's important to notice. And if you do have any questions, that's a good thing for the Q&A, which we haven't mentioned, but each team has an opportunity to ask questions of first. There's a team code that's in the mentors passwords and vouchers section of the dashboard that you can use, but you could also go in and see what other questions have been asked. I guarantee there's been questions about bumpers that are being asked. The interesting one here, this picture here, Megan, too many M's tonight, I think. With this picture of 11-14 in their bumpers. It looks odd at the end, but it's playing a match, so it must be legal, yes?
Yes. So the bumpers don't actually have to be completely level. They just have to be within that 7.5 inch allowance. So the rest of the lower part of the bumpers must be lower than that 7.5, allowing them to go up to the
Yeah, so the highest we could see here, there's no way that can be higher than 7.5 inches, because that's the max height off the floor. So, and this year it's really important to know these numbers because of how the game is going to be played in terms of the cargo ship and I guess the feeder station.
Definitely.
And where is the advantage to making sure you know that? Like, why is that different this year?
Well, because you're going under the cargo ship, there's a bumper allowance as well as the human player loading station. So those bumper allowances, like if you're let's say if you were above the 7.5, first of all, you wouldn't be allowed to play. But second of all, you wouldn't be able to get under those bumper clearances.
Right. The one thing that people should notice is that the rocket ship does not have that indent on the bottom where your bumper could slide under. So that's important to notice. So again, lots of rules. Here's some ways to...
Another thing about bumpers.
Jess, go ahead.
Sorry. One other thing about bumpers is that you don't want it to be too low, or else you won't be able to get on the habitat platform.
Right. So even if you can tilt your robot up, Hinkle's saying that the back end might get stuck and pull the bottom wheels off the ground. Is that right? Something along those lines?
Yeah, like you'll just wedge yourself and won't be able to move.
So that's an important point. That's why Megan's on with us, because she's already building the bumpers so that they can be testing on the robot when they go to a practice field. I'm assuming that when you practice, you're going to put something on it to either the actual bumpers or to simulate. Megan, is that right?
I don't believe so.
Oh.
Actually, since the platform is quite similar to last year, and we are making the using like the similar bumper mounts and stuff, that and since we could get up there last year and everything's pretty much the same, it's not really that important. They believe that they can get up there with ease. So
belief is a good thing. Personally, I'd want to make sure that I tested it. The other thing that we wanted to mention is the numbers, and there's kind of two slides. Some of these have been put in by Hinkle as well. So Megan, just a quick thing on bumper numbers. Obviously, read the rules, but what else would you mention about that?
Basically, make them big, make them visible, easy to read, put them on all sides, Also, you might want to think about something that's durable compared to, like, I don't know, iron-on numbers. Personally, I find that they wear off very easily. So we paint them so that you don't have to like redo it in like the middle of the season.
Yeah. So some of the peel and stick don't hold up. I know Hinkle's got this one here with 2056 on it that says that he's got a big red X here because Hinkle.
Yeah, you're not allowed to put logos on the bump or representing numbers. So like the gear itself you can't use because you can just misidentify that as 256, right?
Right. And the other part, of course, is kind of on an angle here, but if you do have a big gap in your bumper, you can split the numbers between the two sides, which is a change from rule. It's been a rule for a few years, but prior to that, there was a problem with that. You couldn't do that, but you can. It's legal. Okay, well, thank you, Megan and Hinkle, for jumping in with those points. That's great. I'm going to be looking much more carefully at those 4476 bumpers when I'm at an event just to see the quality of work that Megan's done. So thank you. We are joined by George Chisholm, lead mentor from Team 1360, the original first senior mentor in Ontario. And I wanted to get him to talk a little bit about pit construction because his teams always have quite the well-constructed pit. So George, are you able to jump in at this point? He's self-muted. Maybe has walked away. Okay, we're gonna skip George for a second and come back to him. And Hinkle, there's a ton of stuff about robot inspection, and you're the most knowledgeable person we've ever had on about this, since it is your job. So maybe you can give us some key points for all the teams out there.
Yeah, sorry about the noise. The janitor is cleaning up my office right now. So obviously read your manual. For load-in, you should always bring your bag and tag form with you. And basically during load-in, I'm not sure if you mentioned this before. Basically for load-in, you're not allowed to work on your robot. You basically load in, set up your pit, arrange it to whatever is good, and then come back and when the pit's open, and then you can unbag your robot if your bag and tag form has been signed.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's on the loading day. Yeah.
Yep. So during that time, you also want to have your 30-pound withholding or whatever withholding allowance you're given. Basically, any components that you put onto your robot during the access period counts towards your 30 pounds, but this is a honor system, right? So hopefully you would record that and keep track of that and let us know, and everyone just plays fair, right? And so that's basically the 30 pounds is what's fabricated and assembled. So say like if you had a gearbox assembled, that gearbox would be counted towards your 30 pounds. But if, say, your motor was pulled off from the gearbox, then that motor would not count towards the assembled weight. During the event, remember to flash a radio. That will be like sometime after the pit's open, when the FTA finishes setting up the event. Before the event, you also want to be sure that you've got the latest Robo Rio and control station image updated. So I think there was one optional one back in update 4, I believe. It's not necessary, but they could be changing the rules later on, but I don't think so. Right now, they haven't sent out the inspection sheet yet. So, but it's always good to have the latest image anyways. I think the latest image fixes some minor stuff up as well. Also have your safety glasses when you come in. So don't leave them in your pits because when everyone comes in, then you won't be able to go into your pits because the pits are open and stuff may be being drilled or whatnot. So just be safe. Remember to keep your safety glasses with you at all times during the event. And for anything that's not kit of parts, so say like pneumatics cylinders or whatnot, you may want to bring some data sheets or spec sheets for inspection. So I know that some people may have lasers.
Yeah.
Probably not this year, but lasers can only be class 1 or rated class 1. So basically, if they hit you in the eye, it won't burn a hole in your retina. Right. So you want to make sure that you have specs for those if you do use anything that's not from the kit of parts.
Yeah, and
this includes like solenoids and and compressors as well.
So
you don't use kit of parts.
Yeah, so we had a laser. That's the most obvious example. A few years on 4001, and we had to get from the manufacturer. They made the laser for you, this particular company, that it was a class 1, and you had to keep that with you. So we made multiple copies of that because we tended to lose things. But yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, so stuff like that, I tend to have like a binder. So it's also good for judges, whatever you have. So like if you have CAD drawings, you can use that too. Keep it in the binder, including your lockup form, your any specs that you have as well. And also it's good just documents what you've used in years past. So you can say, oh, what was that? Where was that laser that we got for this year? And so you can say, oh, it came from this company over here. So we can always look it up and get more if you need, right?
Exactly right. So the second sheet we're looking at now is about the unbagged time because Ontario is a district, and it goes to the point that Monique Ouellette made about the timing. So maybe you can just quickly explain that once more.
Yes. So again, what Monique said, you can only use 2 hours minimum. So say like if you used 2 hours on Tuesday, 2 hours on Wednesday, and 2 hours on Thursday, that will count towards 6 hours. But like if you use 1 hour on Tuesday and then 3 hours on Wednesday, basically that counts as 5 hours already. So you can't have another day. So if you have another 2 hour or open it for an hour or whatnot, that counts towards 7 hours. And an inspector sees that, and you'll basically be having to fill out a lengthy non-compliance form. So just be aware of that. And for bag and tag, like any reason that you open it up, just note it. And the change this year is that you can't have any robot inspectors or lead robot inspectors open up the bag for you and take a look at do a pre-inspection after or between competition and whenever you bag your robot.
Okay, that's kind of what we want to know. So there's lots of rules about the robot itself that you're dealing with in inspection, and soon, if not already, the inspection sheet will be out. I haven't seen it yet. It usually doesn't come out till close towards the end of bag and tag day. Well, in advance of that, but not usually by now. But you've noted there's some changes here.
Yep. The biggest changes are obviously the sizes. Every year, this year they gave you an extra 5 pounds because there's no more off-board compressors this year. So an extra 5 pounds if you choose to use pneumatics or not, it's there, or you don't really need to worry about it if you don't use compressors. This just basically simplifies our inspection process, so it's a little bit easier. And also automotive motors. Not every automotive motors are legal, only the ones specified in table 10-1 beside this chart on the right-hand side this year. And also bumper weight have gone down to 15 pounds rather than 20 pounds this year as well. And during inspections, just make sure that if you have a mechanism that launches your hatch, like at its highest point, if you have an elevator to score the high hatch at level 3 of the rocket, you won't be able to launch it past 3 feet past your frame perimeter from a standstill, basically. We don't want hatches flying towards FTAs or scorekeepers. That will make them pretty angry as well, or refs as well.
Are they going to have to demonstrate that in inspection?
Yeah.
Okay. It's good to know. And of course, you have here the agenda, the schedule for the day. Why is that important?
Yeah, just because some people leave early because, we're done at the end of the day, or I want to go home at 7 o'clock or whatever. But in reality, pits closes at a certain time. So like on day 0, pits close at 9 o'clock. So you may want to consider having a few students and mentors stay until then, especially if you know that you probably won't be getting inspected or finish inspection by then. So we can get all the teams inspected, or as many teams inspected as possible. Mm-hmm. And also, if you don't go to practice matches, the FTA would like to have your robot on the field at least to just to connect to it, not to run it. Basically, they just want to make sure there was no issues on day 1. Right. Of competition day to actually have delays in starting matches, right? And also just remember to attend the drivers' meetings, and if there's any last-minute updates, you'll be notified of it, and you get to know who are the important people at the competition, basically.
And that's obviously the robot inspectors, the most important people at the competition.
James is the most important person.
Okay, so the last bit of information. You've got there, inspect early, weigh the robot early. And that means you're telling the teams before they finish building to do their own inspection. Is that right?
Yeah, like even if they're not ready, like they're working on programming or whatnot, you may want to weigh your robot early first, because what your scale is at school or wherever you work at may not be the most accurate. And basically we're using our scales at the competition as what everyone has to stick to. So if you are a half a pound or a pound heavier than what you weighed at the school or wherever you worked at, you want to make sure that, we need to take a pound off, and you don't want to be frantic and trying to figure out what you need to chop off 2 hours before pits close, right? So we always want you to spot the problems you can have beforehand, and we can get you any help that you need, especially like if there is a machine shop at the competition, they would be able to help you machine any lightning holes or whatnot. And during the robot inspection, you want to have at least one student and one mentor present. So, and I believe as part of the safety manual, at least one mentor or one member over the age of 18 has to be there at all times, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
would you say that it's rare in your experience for a robot to come into the competition overweight? This is a rare
No.
thing, right? Never happened.
Some teams are really good at going maybe half a pound below or 0.2 pounds below weight. And those are the teams that are either really good or like with CAD and making sure that everything is accounted for so they're not overweight and they're doing everything as well. But you just want to make sure that there's no issues either with sizing or with weighing, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And at the event, the inspectors are there to help you out. They
Right.
want you to compete.
Exactly.
And don't think of them as bad guys. They just want to make sure that you are ready to compete and you won't be, no team is unfairly punished or have an unfair advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So over here is an example of a robot inspection sheet. So this is from 2018. So the initial inspection, we go through mechanical items, electrical items, and if you have any pneumatic items, we check that as well, and then we do a quick power on test. So one other thing is that we may not get everything in terms of, say, if your robot arm can extend more than 30 inches out of the frame perimeter, but you have a program like a soft code kind of limit, we would not count that as our prerogative for letting you pass inspection or not. So, but like, just note that if it does do that, the referees may penalize you, and that's on the field side.
Okay.
And usually inspections take about 20 minutes or whatnot. So yeah. If you have any issues with the robot inspector, you should go to the lead robot inspector if you have any issues, or the FTA, or with any event volunteer coordinator as well. Okay. So we're always there to help you. We want you to have the best experience at a competition. And if you're close to a competition or when your team isn't competing, you should try and volunteer as a robot inspector. We're always looking for more people. It's a great volunteering experience because you get to talk with a lot of teams and things like that. Get to see other robots, what really good robots are, just how they are designed and how they work. Basically, you get a nice close-up view of them, and you get to ask the students a lot of questions, how they run their team and everything. It's just a really good experience, social experience as well. And also, you have really, really good food at events. The volunteers get really good food. And you get to know why certain rules are there in place. Basically, it's to keep everyone fair and for safety as well. And you always want to pay it forward because you've got this experience. You should try and have other people have good experience just as you have, right? So,
Well, that's great. Thank you, Hinkle. That's super informative, and certainly we want to have everybody, if they see Hinkle in an event, to say hi and thank him for what he's done for us today. Even if you're live or if you're listening on YouTube to the recording, it's very much appreciated. I think we should be doing this every year.
Yeah, like if you have any other questions, you can always shoot me an email or shoot Paul an email to forward to me or whatnot.
Sure.
So feel free to do that.
So thanks again, Hinkle. We have now had George join us. He had some connection issues, but
finally,
you're now amongst us, George. So welcome.
Okay. It seems to be. Can you hear me now, Paul?
Yeah, perfectly.
Hello. Okay. It seems to be a common thread here. Read the manual, and the manual is pretty explicit on pit as well. For first-year rookie teams, I would keep it really, really simple. As you develop your team, you may want to consider getting a little fancier with a frame, et cetera, and there are lots of examples. Everybody should wander the pit area to see what they like and what they don't like. Personally, I don't like these pop-up tents that people use. For one thing, they're dark inside, and lighting isn't always very good at events. And the maximum pit size is 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet. And most of those tents are actually over 10 feet high. And you'll never know when the safety guys will tell you to take it down. You may want to consider lighting if you are going to insist on using one of those. There are lots of other examples. One of the issues is they say a maximum 10 foot by 10 foot footprint on the practice area or the pit area. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be 10 foot by 10 foot, and I've seen them down to under 9 feet. So if you arrive and your pit is made of fancy truss work that maxes out at 10, that is set up for 10 feet, and you only have 9 foot, you won't be able to use your pit because you'll be extending into someone else's pit area. And everything has to be contained in that 10-foot footprint. That means if you have some method of dispensing your team goodies outside, like a spaceman in a suit, you can't put it out in the aisle. You can't have things fastened to your pit that stick out into the aisle as well. And the aisle will be, your pit area will be very clearly marked by tape on the floor.
What our pits should look like.
What the pits look like? Depends on your team. They can be very basic. You'll get a 6-foot table or somewhere around 6 foot in your pit. The pits will be laid out in aisles. Normally they're sort of numerical order. Sometimes the organizers will put a rookie team right next to a veteran team so that they can share tools. There will be very, very busy. It will be very, very loud. Just be prepared. There are lots of pictures online of the pit areas in competitions.
So the picture that I'm showing here is of Ryerson, and the reason why that one is there is because that's one of the ones where they reduced the size of the pits to, I think, around 8 or 9 feet, as George was mentioning. So you should know in advance, but things happen, right? It's not always the case.
They do. You need to be able to get all your stuff in and out quickly. It's very annoying for other teams that if you're carrying your stuff in 6-quart baskets and making 20 trips to get in and out. So you've got to get in, get your pit set up, and be prepared to run. So if you're making some monstrosity that takes forever to put up, reconsider how it gets put together. As I said, in first year or second year teams, I keep it simple. Bring your tools in. You may want a banner in the background advertising your team and all its all its sponsors. You'll need an area to put your batteries so that they can charge. If you only have 2 batteries, I'd consider getting some more because sometimes you might not have time for them to fully charge. You'll need something to put your tools in. Again, first year, second year, I'd keep the number of tools to a minimum. That Mondo set of Canadian Tire sockets looks really good in the store on sale, but your chances of using a 1/2-inch drive socket are kind of slim. I don't even take a set to a competition with my team. I use a nice little 1/4-inch drive set. Lee Valley has the best of them. I think they're $20. Buy 2 rather than the Mondo set. You may want to consider some method of displaying your team history and what you do that you're really good at. You could have a monitor with something on it, a thumb drive. You can get a Raspberry Pi set up to play that. It just plugs right into the monitor. The safety inspectors will be wandering and they will be keeping a very close eye on what is going on in the pit area. So if you think you're going to stand on top of the table to do something, think again. There's a good chance they'll see you and they'll speak to you about it. They also look at things like your electrical setup in the pit. They don't like to see daisy chain power bars, and they'll probably tell you to disconnect some of them. Their word is law. If you think you're going to stand on a table to put something, you're not supposed to be climbing on tables. That's why they have ladders. If you didn't bring a ladder, chances are there's a team there that does have a ladder. In the pit, there will be the pit admin table. If you need any help, that's the place to go. If you need to borrow something, that's the place to go. If all of a sudden you're missing a pneumatic cylinder or broken, you need one really badly, chances are there's a team there that has one that will give you. That's the whole goal here. It's not really a competition. Everybody will be very willing to help. We got people online here who've been to lots of competitions. You'll always hear someone on the PA system saying team number whatever needs a whatever, and 3 people they won't run, they'll go walking very quickly. That's a pretty hard and fast rule. No running in the pits, period.
So
and everybody was, yep.
George, I have a couple of questions for you.
Yep.
How much does everything that's going in your pit usually weigh, including the framework and stuff like that? I know you're the one that usually brings it, but
yeah, that's entirely up to you. The pit frame that my team uses is made of ham radio tube, antenna tube that I buy from a company in the U.S. And how many of those are there out there now, Paul? About 7 or 8?
Yeah.
I wrote up detailed instructions. If anybody wants them, you can reach me through Paul. I can send you the instructions, and I like it. Paul's team uses it. Several others do as well. Waffles use it. 4039 uses it, and there are several in the U.S. that use it. So with my team, because my teams, this is our 4th year, but I've been around a lot longer than that. We have a fair amount of stuff we haul in, a lot less than a lot of teams. You've got to get it to and from the competition. So a couple of choices: you can rent a trailer, you can buy a trailer, you can rent a van, you can stuff everything into your mentors' cars, however you choose to get it there. But so it needs to be somewhat mobile.
Yeah. So we have another question. What are some things that you say we should absolutely be in your pit that maybe are not as obvious as socket sets and drills?
Yeah. General tools that you use around the shop when you've been building your robot. Some spare materials. I sometimes have a cardboard tube full of bar stock, various sizes, big cardboard tube. So if I need a piece of 1/2-inch aluminum bar, or another team needs a piece of 1/2-inch aluminum bar, I usually have 5 or 6 feet with me. The machine shop that goes along with the competition will not have spare parts and will not have materials. So if you need a piece of inch aluminum angle, chances are they're not going to have it. But another team probably does, and will give it to you.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, some of the things that are listed in the safety manual would also be good to know. So as George said, and as Megan said, and as Hinkle said, and pretty much everybody, read the manual. Obviously, you want to have a safety kit for a spill kit, something to clean up your pit as well. But I guess the key points there, George, are it should fit your needs.
Yes.
Easy to get up, easy to put down.
Yes. One thing that's a very important part of your pit is however you're transporting your robot. Personally, I like a landscaping wagon. There are all kinds of things, solutions out there. One of the key things that you need to remember is try not to use the little janitor's caretaker cart or an AV cart, because the wheels are too small. And quite often you'll have to go over a cable track or something like that. And if you have 3-inch wheels on your robot cart, you're going to run into problems.
Yeah, that's good. So great tips.
Some teams like to,
Go ahead.
Some teams like to have people running along or going along in front of the robot, yelling "robot" at the top of their lungs. All that does is annoy people. It's much easier to go, "Excuse me, robot coming through," or "watch your back," or something like that. But to have a teenager randomly hollering "robot" at the top of their lungs just annoys everybody.
I'll stop doing that from now on then, George. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So great tips. Any last questions, any last points that any of our panelists would like to make before we go for the night? We've gone a little bit longer than normal, but great information. No? Okay, well, once again, thanks everybody for staying up late. Thank you, George Chisholm from 1360, Hinkle Young from a whole bunch of different teams, and lead robot inspector for the province, Megan Gillespie of 4476, Monique Ouellette from Ottawa from 2706, and Monique Bouguet from 6331. 6-toi-toi-un. And thanks for a little bit of French, ladies. That was very much appreciated. And hopefully everybody has a great week. Be safe tomorrow. They're calling for ice tomorrow morning and all day, so hopefully everybody's safe. And say hi when you see us during the season, George and I and Hinkle, and good luck this year.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.